One of the most beloved and sympathetic villains found in Batman's rogues gallery is Mr. Freeze. Known for his mutated physiology, which forces him to wear a specialized suit to keep his body at sub-zero temperatures, as well as his use of a freeze gun, he's one of the most formidable opponents the Dark Knight has ever faced. Mr. Freeze debuted in Batman number 121 from February of 1959. Originally, his name was Mr. Zero, and apart from a few appearances throughout the golden age of comics, was more of a joke villain than anything to pad out the list of Batman enemies. In his first appearance, Mr. Zero would rob the Gotham City Jewelry Exchange before making his getaway in an ice cream truck. Batman and Robin would follow in hot pursuit with their jet-powered roller skates, only to slip and fall after Mr. Zero freezes the street. The villain would go on to explain his origin to his goons, which involved the invention of an ice gun and a sub-zero solution. Zero would drop one of the containers and get splashed by the chemical. It changed his body, and he was unable to breathe. The only way he was able to counter this effect was by remaining in the lab's cold storage. Though the circumstances behind his mutation have varied a few times over the years, it has been revealed that his body suffers from the symptoms of heat stroke while outside of a cold environment, thus the requirement of a portable sub-zero suit. Anyways, Batman and Robin get frozen into blocks of ice, and thankfully, Batman can miraculously move inside it enough to rock his block back and forth until it breaks. How he's not just dead, I don't know. They beat up the bad guys, and somehow, the steam generated by the broken pipe from Batman's escape changes Mr. Zero back to normal. He no longer needs sub-zero temperatures to survive. Okay? It wasn't until the 1960s Batman TV series and its episodes Instant Freeze and Rats Like Cheese where the character would be called Mr. Freeze for the first time. He would be rebranded in the comics shortly after, making his debut in Detective Comics number 373, having an appearance more in line with what we saw in the first season of the television show. Mr. Freeze would remain fairly stagnant for the next few decades in comics. Not much changed about him or his origin, though at one point he threatened Gotham with a giant freeze cannon in the hopes of blanketing the entire city in a layer of ice, an idea that had been introduced in the 1960s series and was even the inspiration for the story of 1997's Batman and Robin, which is a nice piece of trivia for you. It wasn't until the highly acclaimed Batman animated series from the early 90s, nearly 30 years after Mr. Zero became Mr. Freeze, that something else was finally altered about the character. The genius that is Paul Dini reinvented the villain's origin, making him a much more sympathetic character. In the episode Heart of Ice, my favorite from the entire series, we are introduced to a cryogenic scientist named Victor Freeze, who is hoping to cure his terminally ill wife Nora with his knowledge. He gets mutated due to a corporate scheme while working at GothCorp, but because of the backstory Dini created, Mr. Freeze's obsession with ice and cold, as well as his motivations for crime, are fully explained and understandable. It wasn't so much before. Mr. Freeze is by far one of the strongest sympathetic villains I have ever seen in the superhero medium. I haven't met anyone who can't relate to his motivations of saving his wife, and the character can become quite emotional at times in some of his incarnations. The scene at the end of Sub-Zero still makes me tear up. God damn. Mr. Freeze commits all this evil because of the love he has for one person. He is willing to trade everything to bring them back and be with them once more. Because of what happened to him, Mr. Freeze feels bitter towards other people. After all, in some versions, greed of corporations or those within them led to his condition. His wife Nora, and the things he could do in his past life before he was confined to a sub-zero environment, were robbed from him, and he will stop at nothing to get them back. His care and compassion for these things are stronger than the compassion he feels for everything else, which is now a frozen wasteland. Throughout his various adaptations over the years, he has kidnapped Barbara Gordon in order to sacrifice her in a rare blood transfusion to save Nora, destroyed the things that people cherish so they can all feel the pain he does, and even with the help of Batman, brings Nora back, if only temporarily, and sails off into the horizon to be alone with the love of his life one last time, for the few days she has left. Mr. Freeze is one of my favorite Batman villains, and like I said a little earlier in the video, it's tough to find a more sympathetic character in all of comics. His motivations are some of the strongest I've seen from any supervillain, and they always seem to find some new way to tell his story or add some new twist to it. What are your thoughts on Mr. Freeze? Let me know in the comments section down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to help support me, and hit that bell icon to be notified of all future content. As always, I will see you in the next one. Take care.